During the last ice age, enormous glaciers trapped so much water on land that global sea level fell by roughly 130 meters. The weight pressing down on the ocean floor decreased, underwater volcanic systems became more active, and iron-rich fluids escaped from cracks thousands of meters beneath the surface. New research suggests that this iron eventually reached sunlit waters, fed microscopic plankton, and helped the ocean pull more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The discovery connects parts of Earth that seem almost completely separate. Ice sheets on continents changed the pressure above the seafloor. That pressure influenced volcanoes hidden along underwater mountain ranges. Those volcanoes released iron into the deep ocean. Ocean currents carried some of it upward, where microscopic life used it to grow. When part of that life sank, carbon moved into the deep sea. The entire chain may have helped regulate Earth's climate during transitions out of the last two ice ages. To understand why this is surprising, begin with a strange region of the Pacific Ocean. The eastern equatorial Pacific receives intense sunlight and contains plenty of major nutrients, including nitrate and phosphate. Those ingredients should support enormous blooms of phytoplankton. But much of the region contains less life than expected. The missing ingredient is iron. Phytoplankton are microscopic organisms that use sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into organic matter. Like plants on land, they need several nutrients to build cells and perform photosynthesis. Nitrogen and phosphorus are required in large amounts, while iron is needed only in tiny quantities. Yet a tiny shortage can stop the entire system. Imagine a factory filled with steel, glass, workers, and electricity, but missing one small computer chip. Almost everything needed for production is present, but the assembly line cannot operate. In large areas known as high-nutrient, low-chlorophyll regions, iron functions like that missing component. For decades, scientists believed that windblown dust was the main external source of iron for these waters. Dust lifted from deserts can travel thousands of kilometers before falling into the ocean. Once dissolved, some of its iron becomes available to phytoplankton. The new study does not reject that process. Instead, it identifies another source hidden far below the waves. Earth's ocean floor is crossed by a continuous system of mid-ocean ridges. These are underwater mountain chains formed where tectonic plates move apart and magma rises to create new crust. Seawater flows into cracks, becomes heated by hot rock, reacts with minerals, and returns through hydrothermal vents. Some vents release dark clouds that resemble smoke. The clouds are actually filled with tiny mineral particles, including compounds containing iron. Vent fluids can exceed 340 degrees Celsius, but the enormous pressure of the deep ocean prevents them from boiling. Because most vents lie more than 2 kilometers below the surface, scientists once assumed that their iron would remain trapped in deep water or quickly fall into nearby sediment. That assumption has changed. Measurements have shown that hydrothermal plumes can carry dissolved iron enormous distances. In parts of the South Pacific, elevated iron concentrations have been detected as far as 4,000 kilometers from their source. Researchers now estimate that vents add approximately 3 to 4 billion moles of dissolved iron to the ocean each year, an amount comparable to the contribution from atmospheric dust. But one major question remained. Could iron released in complete darkness actually reach phytoplankton living near the sunlit surface? Researchers searched for an answer inside sediment collected near the East Pacific Rise, a vast mid-ocean ridge beneath the eastern equatorial Pacific. The cores contained material deposited layer by layer during the past 200,000 years. They did not simply look for preserved plankton. They examined nitrogen isotopes trapped inside the shells of foraminifera, tiny marine organisms whose remains accumulated on the seafloor. When phytoplankton consume nitrate, they tend to use the lighter nitrogen isotope more readily. This changes the isotope ratio remaining in the water. That chemical signal can eventually become preserved inside foraminifera shells. By measuring the ratio, researchers reconstructed how completely phytoplankton consumed nutrients in surface waters at different times in the past. The sediment became a biological record of an ocean that no longer exists. When the 200,000-year timeline was assembled, two striking peaks appeared. During the transitions out of the last two ice ages, phytoplankton consumed more nutrients than usual. The team compared those peaks with records of hydrothermal activity preserved in the same region. The timing closely matched periods when iron emissions from the East Pacific Rise increased. This was not the result the project originally expected to find. The researchers tested several alternatives. Perhaps more desert dust had fallen into the ocean. Perhaps the region lacking iron had shifted position. Changes in oxygen-deficient waters might have altered the nitrogen signal. Nutrients transported from the Southern Ocean could also have influenced the Eastern Pacific. Those explanations did not match the timing as well as the hydrothermal record. The evidence pointed downward. During an ice age, water moves from the ocean into enormous continental ice sheets. Sea level falls, reducing the weight of the water pressing on the ocean crust. Mid-ocean ridges are normally buried under several kilometers of seawater, and that water exerts immense pressure. Removing approximately 130 meters of it is like slowly lifting part of a lid from a pressurized geological system. The pressure change does not immediately produce an eruption. Magma moves through the mantle and crust over thousands of years. Previous research suggests that maximum hydrothermal activity may have occurred around 15,000 years after the fastest sea level fall. That delay helps explain why volcanic activity peaked during glacial terminations, when ice sheets had already begun retreating and sea level was rising again. The volcanism was responding to pressure changes created earlier. More ridge volcanism meant stronger hydrothermal circulation and larger releases of iron-rich fluids. Once in the ocean, the iron did not travel through still water. Currents, turbulence, upwelling, and interactions between flowing water and underwater mountains dispersed it. Computer models used in the study showed that under stronger hydrothermal conditions, iron released at depth could move into water layers connected to the surface. The route was neither straight nor fast. The iron could travel horizontally for great distances before mixing and upwelling carried it toward sunlight. There, phytoplankton gained access to the missing nutrient. More iron allowed them to consume more nitrate and grow. As they performed photosynthesis, they absorbed carbon dioxide. Much of that carbon was recycled near the surface when organisms were eaten or decomposed. But a fraction sank as dead cells, waste, or particles. This process is part of the ocean's biological carbon pump. Microscopic organisms capture carbon near the surface, and gravity carries some of it into deeper water. If it remains there long enough, the carbon is isolated from the atmosphere for centuries or longer. The study therefore reveals an unusual possibility. Volcanic activity normally brings carbon from inside Earth toward the surface. But underwater volcanism may also release iron that helps marine life move carbon in the opposite direction. The same geological event could produce two competing effects. Mid-ocean ridges can release carbon dioxide from magma, contributing carbon to the ocean and atmosphere. At the same time, their iron may fertilize phytoplankton, strengthen the biological pump, and increase carbon storage. Researchers do not yet know which effect dominated globally. In the eastern equatorial Pacific, the changes in nutrient consumption probably had only a limited direct effect on atmospheric carbon dioxide. The region was ideal for detecting the connection, but it may not have been the most powerful place for changing global climate. The Southern Ocean could be more important. Water surrounding Antarctica plays a central role in exchanging carbon between the deep ocean and atmosphere. It also contains large quantities of nutrients, but is strongly limited by iron. Mid-ocean ridges cross beneath the Antarctic circumpolar current, and their rugged topography creates turbulence that can push deep water upward. Modern observations have already connected hydrothermal iron with phytoplankton blooms in parts of the Southern Ocean. If the Ice Age mechanism also operated there, underwater volcanoes may have influenced atmospheric carbon dioxide more strongly than the Pacific evidence alone can show. That remains a hypothesis rather than a confirmed global conclusion. Researchers now need sediment records collected near Southern Ocean ridges to determine whether plankton responded to hydrothermal iron during past glacial transitions. The study also does not prove that humans should deliberately add iron to the sea. Artificial ocean fertilization has been proposed as a carbon removal strategy, but its effectiveness and ecological risks remain uncertain. Added iron can change food webs, oxygen levels, nutrient distributions, and greenhouse gas production. A natural process unfolding across thousands of years is not automatically safe to reproduce rapidly. The importance of the research lies in understanding Earth's past. Ice ages were not controlled by a single mechanism. Changes in Earth's orbit altered sunlight. Ice sheets reflected energy and changed sea level. Oceans stored and released heat and carbon. Dust carried nutrients across continents. Volcanoes added gases and minerals. Living organisms transformed the chemistry around them. The new evidence adds another connection to that network. A falling sea may have reduced pressure on underwater magma systems. The response arrived thousands of years later as stronger volcanism and hydrothermal activity. Iron then traveled through the deep ocean and reached the sunlit surface. Phytoplankton used it to grow, changing nutrient consumption and potentially increasing carbon storage. A glacier on land could therefore affect microscopic life far out at sea through volcanoes that no human could see. That is the central discovery. Earth's climate system does not stop at the ocean's surface or at the boundary between rock and water. The solid planet, the sea, the atmosphere, and life are linked by slow exchanges that can stretch across entire ice age cycles. Deep beneath the eastern Pacific, sediment preserved evidence of one of those connections for 200,000 years. It suggests that when the ocean became lighter, the seafloor became more active. When the seafloor released more iron, life at the surface responded. The smallest organisms in the ocean may have been fertilized by one of the largest mountain systems on Earth, hidden entirely beneath the waves.